Last episode, I suggested that the best way to prepare for our adventure into the psyche is to set aside our beliefs and assume that everything we think we know is straight up false. Not because it actually is, but because spiritual exploration is a process of inquiry, of asking questions we'd never consider asking under normal circumstances. We'd never consider asking them because, on the surface, the answers seem too obvious, too self-evident. But when we set aside our beliefs and approach these questions with a white belt mindset, we open ourselves up to new and interesting possibilities. Possibilities that have the potential to transform our lives for the better. Beliefs can be useful, but they can also obscure and distort what we view through their lens. And since we are explorers, traveling through uncharted territory in order to learn more about it, our goal is to see things as clearly as possible. To that end, I find it useful personally to regard my beliefs as theories. I embrace them with varying degrees of confidence, but I stay open to new information and new experiences, even when these cause me to change my position. And above all, I never regard my theories as factual or absolutely true. And this, again, is very helpful when I want to set them aside and look at something with fresh eyes. It wasn't always like this for me, my friends, but in recent years I have come to see how foolish and arrogant it is for me to express certainty in any of the beliefs that I hold. Having spent the last few years searching for something concrete, something foundational, an objective truth or fact that will stand up to scrutiny, I have precious little to show for my efforts. Paradoxically, one of the only things I'm certain of is that certainty itself is a kind of trap, an intellectual and creative dead end, and yes, I would even go so far as to call it a sin. Albert Einstein, the archetype of scientific genius in Western civilization, once described our knowledge as a circle of light. As it grows and expands, he said, so too does the circle of darkness that surrounds it. Einstein correctly observed that the unknown outweighs the known and grows in lockstep. The more we expand our knowledge, the more we reveal the darkness of our own ignorance surrounding it. And that's what this video is all about, my friends. The limitations of human knowledge and, by extension, our unlimited capacity for self-deception and ignorance. But before we get to that, hit my music. Let's start by stating the obvious. Everything you think you know about yourself, other people, and the world at large comes from your personal experience. Even when you learn something formally, say by taking a class or reading a book, you absorb the information in the same manner, through the filter of your subjective perspective. As I see it, a perspective is made up of two components. Let's call them perception and cognition. Perception is the sum total of sensory data, what you see, hear, smell, taste, feel at any given moment. Cognition, on the other hand, is the mind's analysis of what you perceive, the voice inside your head that's always trying to make sense of what's going on in and around you, and some other stuff you don't actually notice or acknowledge. Your intuitions, gut feelings, daydreams, and things of that nature. Now, perception is an automatic process over which you have very little control. Short of closing your eyes or plugging your ears, your sense organs will constantly collect information and ship it to the brain for processing, where it's assembled into this experience of reality you're having right now. Cognition, on the other hand, is semi-automatic. We have some influence over the mind's running commentary, though much of it is preconditioned by factors beyond our control. And perhaps the most significant influence over our cognition is our belief system or worldview. For example, a person who was born and raised in a conservative Christian household will use methods and models rooted in that tradition to make sense of the world. As such, their opinions, judgments, and experiences will all be shaped and influenced by this belief system at a subconscious level. Everyone is subject to this, myself included. So, in a spirit of transparency, I'd like to disclose to you that I rely on the scientific method when trying to make sense of the world. Why the scientific method, you ask? Well, because the proof is in the pudding, as they say. Much of the technology we use day in, day out is built on an understanding of nature derived from this simple yet powerful method. If the scientific method was flawed, our understanding of nature would be flawed, and we would expect most of our technology to malfunction or not function at all. Airplanes, computers, cell phones, combustion engines. The fact that these things work is a testament to the reliability of the scientific method, especially when we're trying to pry into the underlying nature of things. So what does the scientific method say about my ability to know something with absolute certainty? What does it say about the accuracy of my senses or the quality of my judgments? First, that my senses pick up a tiny sample of all the available data. If something is too small or too big or too subtle, my senses can't pick it up. As such, my perception of reality is nothing like reality itself. Instead, it's more like an artist's rendition, stitched together with best guesses and shortcuts and approximations. Naive realism, that is, the idea that what we perceive as reality itself, has long been under attack in the realms of philosophy and spirituality. But it wasn't until very recently that the general population finally got a hint of just how different reality is from our perception of it. Matter is mostly empty space. Particles double as waves. Light represents a small segment of a much larger energetic spectrum, most of which is completely undetectable to our senses. Static objects are in perpetual motion at the atomic level. Even the ground beneath our feet, so stationary and stable, is spinning and flying through space at unimaginable speeds. And then there's our interpretation of this artistic rendition. Spoiler alert, it's even less reliable, being subject to various assumptions and expectations that fly under the conscious mind's radar. Researchers have compiled exhaustive lists of common biases and heuristics, and these are just the ones we know about. Now, if you still feel certain about your own views and opinions, or if you find yourself agreeing with the information I've just shared with you, but also thinking to yourself, not me, I don't fall for these tricks, that's called a self-serving bias. You may not fall for these tricks as often or as hard as other people, but you fall for them all the same, like everybody else, myself included. Surely you can think of a time in your life when you felt absolutely certain about something, only to discover at a later date that you were totally wrong. There's no shame in admitting this. In fact, I have a long list of such examples from my own life, and whenever I find myself feeling or expressing absolute certainty in anything, I consciously revisit one of these episodes, and I have a good laugh. For me, this is a helpful reminder that I don't know shit. Collectively, I mean like as a species, our list of such examples is exhaustive and growing by the day. Creationism, geocentrism, phrenology, the concepts of race and racial superiority, the idea that the Milky Way galaxy is the entire damn universe. At one time or another in the past, these were all accepted facts. Now, of course, we look back at these, roll our eyes, and have a good laugh. We think we know better. But if history teaches us anything, it should be to exercise caution with respect to so-called facts. All it takes is one new piece of information, and suddenly we have to renovate all of our precious models about the way things are and ought to be. In closing, I would like to paraphrase the German philosopher Edmund Husserl, who said, "All perception is a gamble." To this, I would simply add, all cognition is a story. Our opinions, beliefs, and theories make up the building blocks of the story. Like all good tales, it contains elements of truth. Sometimes it even closely resembles the reality upon which it is based. But it is still a story, and as such, we should always try to take it with a grain of salt. Thanks for watching this episode of The Outsider's Perspective. Hopefully you got something out of it, hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you'll tune in for the next episode as we continue on our expedition into the psyche. Until then, live well, my friends.